in a moment when the competition between China and the United States for global leadership could create constraints and a side effect for each of us, without us willing or even able to imagine handing our interests over to one or the other, how to react. And I will be clear. France is a friend and an ally of the United States, and is a friend, and we do cooperate, even if sometimes we disagree and compete with China. I do intend to remain so, loyally, with a demanding approach of our own interests. But France is no less attached to what is essential for herself: strategic autonomy, freedom of sovereignty. And we do defend this approach for Europe and for Indo-Pacific, which means we want to cooperate, but we don't want to depend. We want to cooperate, but we don't want to be instructed on a daily basis what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how our life will change because of the decision of a single person. I do consider that rejecting double standards in all these affairs do not imply balancing everything, but very clearly requires us to be very consistent in this approach. And I insist on that because I do believe that the main risk today is a risk of division of the world, and a division between the two superpowers. And the instruction given to all the others: you have to choose your side. If we do so, we will kill the global order, and we will destroy, methodically, all the institutions we created after the Second World War in order to preserve peace and to have cooperation on health, on climate, on human rights, and so on. But we need them, probably much more than before. This is why I believe our key challenge is how to preserve peace and stability and prosperity in this current environment. And in a moment when the competition between China and the United States for global leadership could create constraints and a side effect for each of us, without us willing or even able to imagine handing our interests over to one or the other, how to react. And I will be clear. France is a friend and an ally of the United States, and is a friend, and we do cooperate, even if sometimes we disagree and compete with China. I do intend to remain so, loyally, with a demanding approach of our own interests. But France is no less attached to what is essential for herself: strategic autonomy, freedom of sovereignty. And we do defend this approach for Europe and for Indo-Pacific, which means we want to cooperate, but we don't want to depend. We want to cooperate, but we don't want to be instructed on a daily basis what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how our life will change because of the decision of a single person. And the commitment by France is part of a long-term commitment. It's a singular voice, faithful to a certain idea of peoples and their independence, which General de Gaulle set out in 1966 in his speech in Phnom Penh. And this idea remains the compass of France, and we intend to continue being a force for peace and equilibrium. Having spoken about Europe, about the alliance between Europe and this region, what to do together? New coalitions, new agreements, and how to reset a new rule-based order. 70 years ago, the Bandung Conference was for many the opportunity to express their rejection of the logic of blocs and to express their desire to find their own way. The time for non-alignment has undoubtedly passed, but the time for coalitions of action has come and requires that countries capable of acting together give themselves every means to do so. we must show consistency where others practice a double game. And this is exactly my call tonight at the Shangri-La Dialogue. Let's build new coalition for open trade, open dialogue to de-risk our models, stable environment, and new coalitions to stabilize open and rule-based order. The rules must remain the inviolability of borders, respect for sovereignty, refusal to use force as a means of domination, and we must cultivate a spirit of independence and a desire for cooperation. And saying that, I have the feeling almost to quote the DNA and to describe the DNA of Singapore. But this is exactly what we need. With, in fact, the offer to both the US and China to join such an approach. But we cannot just remain seated and say, okay, there is no more WTO. What do we do with the tariffs? Okay, we are not so sure that we have the full-fledged guarantee in the existing alliance. What do we do? We want to act. We want to preserve our stability, our peace, and our prosperity. So let's work together. Let's build a positive new alliance between Europe and Asia based on our common norms, on our common principles. Our shared responsibility is to ensure with others that our countries are not collateral victims of the imbalances linked to the choices made by the superpowers. Our response must be to relaunch our efforts to develop sustainable trade, respectful of common social and environmental standards, and step by step, the European Union is building this network of new generation agreements, and this is what we want to do with ASEAN countries and CPTPP. I do believe indeed that based on such an approach, we can deliver very credible and concrete results. And I really believe that based on such an approach, we can convince the others to join us, given our magnitude and our credibility. This is, for me, the content of the strategic autonomy we have to deploy now in Europe, and we have to cooperate on this basis with your region. I will just conclude now with a plea, a call for action for Europe and Asia to work together on a coalition of independence, a coalition of countries that won't be enrolled but won't be bullied, a coalition of countries that object to the double standard, a coalition of countries that will pool their strengths to ride the race of technology, uphold norms, and protect their sovereignty, a coalition of countries that will navigate the rough seas of trade and protect the global commons of nature and climate, and finally, a coalition of countries determined not to yield to the whims of the greed of others, but to chart a peaceful way, to bring balance in trouble, and to affirm that negative passions can be opposed and indeed superseded by universal values. This is our common DNA, and this is exactly, I do believe, why Singapore does exist, why your region have so many countries being independent today, and why both France and the European Union are here today. Thank you for your attention.